So this is another continuation of my adventures in consciousness. It is an absolute delight to interview Dr. Bruce Lipton. You're the author of The Biology of Belief and The Honeymoon Effect, and you are an authority on really bridging science and spirituality. So I'm going to start with belief. The name of my film is Deconstructing Sentience. So if you break it all down, all these conditionings, all these programs that we have, the subconscious mind, which you talk about brilliantly, what happens when we actually deconstruct belief?
Well, I'm not really sure the direction that you're going in, but if I was to deconstruct it, the first thing is, where did I get it? And how to start. And life experiences are really the drive force, okay? And the significance about that is that we acquire information, but as we talk about in regard to in my perception of sentience, not only do you get information, but you get, I would like to relate sentience to a compass. Which direction I go is based on a sensation that I get. So in other words, when I wanted to teach my daughter when she was very young about fire, you can talk until you're blue in the face all about the details of fire and everything. But it's only when I had her move her finger close to a fire and closer until then the feeling of the fire came in. Then it made reality out of it. You can talk to your blue in face about, the temperature and every other aspect, but if you don't have feeling, then you're too disconnected from it. Feeling makes it personal at that point. So in a belief, you get information, but it's also associated with your feelings about what you're experiencing in that learning moment. And so, a child comes in and has a brain, and the brain is a computer. We all know that, okay? But then the important part about a computer is if you buy a brand new computer and you open it up and you push start and it boots up, I go, great, you got an operating system. I say, fine, do something with it. It's like, you can't do anything with it. You have no programs, okay? And so the first part of the development gets to the brain with the operating system. And in the last trimester, this is when programs begin to be installed, okay? And it's interesting because if you go back to the original programs, the programs are coming from the mother. And these programs affect the genetic activity of the child in a sense that when I was first teaching in medical school, we talk about what's the role of a mother back those days. And we say, well, she provides nourishment. And I say, well, what about the development? Well, in those days, genes control the development. So the mother is nothing more than an incubator providing nutrition. But in the world of epigenetics, we start to find out that environment is what is regulating genetic activity. So the mother is sending information as well as nutrients, because blood is where all the emotional chemicals are, the growth factors, the neuropeptides, all those things that regulate our functions are. So blood has nutrition and information. And a mother's experiences in the world are translated to the fetus before there's any consciousness in that fetus, okay? And a lot of it is basically sensory, because if the mother is in shock and stress hormones are in there, the stress hormones in the mother's blood go across the placenta, and in the fetus feels the exact same experience as the mother, same physiology, okay? So the mother has experiences of what's going on in the world, and if she has a pattern of behavior, then it's like music. That you get the music. Here's the music of a behavior. What caused it? What was the stimulus? What was the meaning of it? Child isn't privy to that, but it gets to learn patterns of music, okay? And then as the beliefs come in my perspective of this, the beliefs become lyrics to a certain degree. So the music is already there, but for the child's individual personal experiences, playing that music will generate behaviors of personal experiences that the child will have that the mother wasn't having. So the first level is really to get experiences of safety or protection. That's basically the two extremes of information. Are you safe, or are you in fear of something? Because this is the main motivations of moving towards something or away from something. So the idea, the child gets the music, but has to make lyrics based on their own personal learning, which becomes their belief system.
I see.
That was a long answer for a very short question.
Oh no, I loved it. And you went into emotions being a compass. Actually said sentience being a compass.
Yes.
So in that way, what is it that's actually guiding us? If you break it down a little bit for me, as a cellular biologist.
Yes. We'll break it down far enough to go into physics.
Brilliant.
And the idea about physics is this, is that vibrations are waves. And if you drop two rocks in a pond and there are ripples, waves coming toward each other, the waves don't just pass through each other, they interact with each other. And the interaction is based on what is called interference. The ripples from rock A hit the ripples from rock B, they interfere with each other. But when energy comes together, there's two extremes of the collective nature of the combined energy. Two energies can come together, let's say low energies come together, and when they come together, you add up the values of the energy. So two lower energies can create interference called constructive interference, create a higher vibration. In human terms, it's called good vibes. Good vibes are when two energy sources come near each other, but they enhance each other, create greater energy than either source has alone. You amped up the energy, you amped up the vibe, okay? The opposite is when two energies can come together, but they can cancel each other out. Well, one wave is going up, the other wave is going down. So I say, well, add them up and it goes to zero. And all of a sudden I say, well, that's interference, but it's not constructive, it's called destructive. It cancels energy. And the significance of canceling energy is it's a destructive interference because the two interfere, but they cancel. It's also called bad vibes. So I say, so what are good vibes and bad vibes? And the answer comes down in biology simply, life is the consequence of good vibes. Death is the consequence of bad vibes. And so we are first given, before education, before socialization and all that stuff, an individual is given a compass. In my lectures, what I frequently talk about is, look, a snail comes out of an egg. No mother, no father, it's in the world. How does it know where to go and what to do? There's nobody teaching it to say, eat this and avoid this or anything. And so it's like, wow, how can something have a whole life without any particular programming? In my way of thinking, it's very simple. There's one gauge on the dashboard, just one gauge. It's the energy gauge. If the energy goes up, go that direction. But if the energy goes down, energy is life. If the energy is going down, losing life. So without any consciousness of what's going on, the first thing is, am I gaining energy, which is enhancing my life? Or am I losing energy, which is compromising my life? I can feel that, one gauge, one sensory gauge. And so all of a sudden I say, so what does a snail need to instruct it in its life? I said, all it needs to do is read the gauge. If it's food that's good for it, the vibe will be good. If it's food that is bad for it, the vibe will cancel because of the energy not being in harmony. Harmony, health. Harmony is health. And the vibes are the music. And there's noise or harmony. And harmony means amplification and everything living in that beautiful, coordinated kind of existence, as versus noise, which says this reading is not supporting me at all. So feelings come before the learning part. But the learning part, then you can start to assign, now that you are learning something and you have a feeling about it, then you put that feeling and the learning together. And this is how two people can be in the exact same place, respond to the exact same field, and one could be afraid in that same field, and the other one could be very happy in that same field, and they're both reading the field. And I say, yeah, but it's the first one learned when they heard that field. What did I feel when I learned? Because a learning moment isn't just the data moment, it's the value moment. And the value is energy. Life is energy. So it simplifies things really very easily, but then the problem is this. You could be in the wrong situation, get a bad vibe in what could be a very good piece of information, and now you've misread the field. And this, I think, is the biggest issue, is that the conditions in which children are raised by parents who are totally unaware of the fact that they're programming a child's life. And I emphasize this in my lectures, very important. The Jesuits for 400 years told people, give me a child until it is 7 and I will show you the man. People have heard this and it's like, oh, that's nice. That's a nice, pithy statement. And I go, no, you didn't listen to what they were saying. If I program your first 7 years, I own the rest of your life. And because everyone has to be programmed. Why? Because my computer with an operating system and no program is useless. So programs are the step that coordinate me into the field, but then it's based on environment and where you are and all these other things. And that's why it's not so uniform. For two people can have completely different response to the same stimulus.
Yes. Powerful.
Well, it's amazing because if you understand from my perspective, understanding the nature of who we are from quantum physics to biology, quantum physics to epigenetics actually is the primary connection, is that we are creating this life. And there's power. Everybody has power until a program comes in that says you are not powerful. And if you buy the program and it's your belief, then you will compromise your power based on just a belief. And this becomes very critical in the world because it's like, what's my program? And if you take away my power and I operate from a condition of being powerless, then you control me. I have lost power, not because I don't have power. I've lost power because I've been programmed not to express power. So in a universe or in a world here where everyone is equally powerful, then how do you get very powerful people and people who live in a trash pile? The answer is, what programming did you give them?
Yes. I was shocked to see 95% is the statistic.
95% is subconscious behavior, and people don't understand it because it's invisible, subconscious. And the idea is this: consciousness is creating our life experience, physics, biology, coherent thought. But then basically we have to understand is that the consciousness that we have is coming from what is called the conscious mind, which is creative. And the failure of the whole thing, you want to tell them, if I want to say, where did the whole thing go wrong? And the whole thing goes wrong is that when consciousness is running the system, it's got its hands on the wheel, it's driving me. Consciousness represents wishes, desires, aspirations, imagination, and you can manifest these things, okay? I say, great, when consciousness has got its hands on the wheel, you're going toward wishes and desires. But then this is the problem, and the problem is this. Consciousness can not only look out the window and see where we're going, but consciousness can think. I say, what's the relevance? I say, a thought is an inside job. I have to disconnect from the outside to have a thought. I have to take my attention and go, instead of looking out, look in and say, I usually say in a lecture, I say, tell me what you're doing on Sunday. I say, you don't have it written in front of you. Where are you going to get the answer from? I have to think. I say, but when you are thinking, where is your direction of attention? And when inside, I'm thinking, I go, well, this is the problem that people have no idea of. Yes, consciousness is running this biology, but the moment I'm thinking, consciousness lets go of the wheel. It's inside. But it doesn't mean if you're walking down the street that you fell off the curb or you hit a tree or you're driving a car and you crash into things because you're thinking, is because subconscious is autopilot. It just steps right in and grabs the wheel. And I say, well, that's great. And then I go, yeah, it's great except for this. It's going to drive according to the program that was downloaded in the subconscious. And as the Jesuits informed us, whoever our teachers were in the first 7 years shaped the download. And as I understand it, up to 70% of the programs that were downloaded were disempowering, self-sabotaging, limiting beliefs. I go, so what? I go, consciousness is driving toward wishes and desires. Thought comes in, subconscious kicks in. Now where's it driving? Wherever the heck the program said it's driving. And they're mostly negative, so you're driving off the road. You lost your power. But I go, did you see it as your conscious personal identity? And I go, no, because consciousness was redirected. So let me relate a story. It's only been 32 years in my lectures for 32 years, so I love the story because it gets to the point. You have a friend, you know your friend's behavior very, very well, and you know your friend's parent. And one day you see your friend has the exact same behavior as their parent. So, you want to tell your friend, you get all excited. You go, hey, Bill, you're just like your dad. And then back away from Bill. The first thing that Bill is going to do is go ballistic. How can you compare me to my dad? I'm nothing like my dad. It's like I'm not connected to that. I'm not. And I go, problem. The amount of thinking time is approximately 95 to 99% of an individual's life. 95% is the average of how much time we spend thinking, which means 95% of our life is not coming from the wishes and desires, hands on the wheel, take me where I want to go. 95% of my life is coming from the program. Yeah, but if the programs are negative, I say, yeah, so what? I have a negative program. Why is it relevant? Did consciousness observe it? No, consciousness was thinking and never observed. And so Bill, who got the program from his father in the first 7 years, plays the program when he's thinking, but does not see it. And therefore, when confronted with the fact that his behavior was like his dad, it's like not in his conscious mind, but then the idea is we have been asleep more or less, thinking, we're running with the conscious mind. So whatever is happening is from our creativity. When it turns out, no, it's not. It's coming from the program. And since most of them are disempowering programs, and people struggle in this life. Do they have to struggle? No, it's a belief that this is the way life is. Life is tough. Reprogramming your mind is very, very, very difficult. And I go, if that's what you believe, then that's what you're going to manifest. I love it. It's 2,500 years ago, the Buddha. What we think, we become. And I say, yeah, but what do you think? I go, well, 95% of the day is not your thoughts. It's coming from the program. And so everybody's walking around in the world of the matrix. They've all been programmed, but you don't know it because you're in the program and you don't see it. But you can get out of the program. I love it because one of the things that science has recognized that takes us out of being in the conscious robbing program, the subconscious program. Why are we in subconscious? Because conscious thinking. But science has recognized that when people fall in love, they stop thinking. They stay mindful. You go, why? Well, if you've been looking for this individual your whole life and they show up, why would you be thinking? You should be here enjoying it. And so in that moment of enjoyment, the conscious mind stays present. And all of a sudden, for the first time in an individual's life, they stop playing the program. I said, but what was the consequence? It's the red pill in the matrix. When I stopped playing the program, what did I create? A honeymoon. That's the consequence of falling in love. Head over heels. Your life could be blah, 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 blah. You fall in love 24 hours later. My God, life is beautiful. Oh, the music's great, the food, even that lousy job's not so lousy anymore. Everything's great. And I go, but what happened? And the answer was, you stopped playing the program. You started creating from what? Wishes and desires. What's your wish? To be in love, to have joy, happiness, to have heaven on earth. I go, so what'd you manifest? Heaven on earth, called the honeymoon. Now, the unfortunate part is people didn't know how they got into it. But because of not knowing how they got into it, they also lose it. And the honeymoons are very short. Some could be a few days, some could be months, well, how come you lose the honeymoon? The answer is, well, you can stay, mindful for a long period of time. But in the world that we live, it's so busy and so many responsibilities and so many chores and jobs and blah, blah, blah. And the moment all that comes into your head, is the moment you start thinking. And the moment you start thinking, now your behavior is not coming from the wishes and desires, the honeymoon generating. You go revert right back to the program behavior. And it ends the honeymoon. It ends the honeymoon for a very simple reason. When you met that other person, I like to put a little sidebar in here. A honeymoon does not require being in love with another person. I use it because it's a great example. But you can be in love with art, gardening, cooking, I don't care, whatever it is that takes you in enthusiasm of life and keeps you present because you're so involved. That is the equivalent of making a honeymoon. When you're so involved with it, you keep your mind present. And I go, in relationships, when you met this other person, you were not playing your father's and your mother's program. You were playing who you wanted to be. The most loving, wonderful, supportive, beautiful person you want to be. You create that. Your partner sees that. They're creating their perfect self. And the two perfect selves come together, and then together they create the honeymoon. But there comes that day where one of them will be thinking, and the other one comes in. I was just saying in a lecture, and so my partner Margaret comes in, and I'm thinking, we found a honeymoon. We're on a heaven on earth game right here. And I'm thinking about something, and she asked me a very simple question, and I turn around and go, blah, blah, blah. And she looks at me and goes, who are you? And this is where the whole thing begins to fall apart. For a simple reason was this. The blah, blah, blah that came out of my mouth at that time didn't come from my wishes and desires mind. It came from the subconscious programming, the way my father treated my mother. I go, so why is it relevant? Margaret never saw this behavior in our relationship at all. There was no negative aspect to this at all. And all of a sudden it shows up. Where the heck did that come from? You know? And the reality was, I said it, but then now I come back to my perspective. I'm the one that said it. I'm Bill in this case. And she's saying, how, you know, what kind of behavior is that to me? And Bill going, what are you talking about? Because when we are, you know, are thinking, we're playing these behaviors, but we're the ones that don't observe. Bill doesn't observe his own behavior. I'm not like my father. It's like, yes, you are. And the idea is, if my father's voice comes into my honeymoon relationship and my father was a bad program, then I just threw a monkey wrench in a relationship and I did not see it. And now we are in conflict. And as more thinking comes in and more negative behaviors show up, there's conflict and there's compromise in a relationship. If it's a simple thing and then it's a compromise, okay, Bruce is really a good guy most of the time, but sometimes he's an idiot. Okay, I can live with that. But when Bruce is an idiot more of the time than less of the time, there's a point where the compromise might not work anymore. It's like this relationship ends. And people are lost in the mystery of, we had this great honeymoon, and then it turned into this. What happened? And the answer is, you had the great honeymoon because you stayed conscious and stopped playing the programs, and you lost the honeymoon when the programming that you got from your developmental period takes over, and you yourself do not see it. And it's interesting to me because I'm not a religious person by any means. I'm a spiritual person, but not religious. But there is a line in the Bible from Jesus' story that it always gets me, because this is, if people would get this one line, it will resolve the whole issue. And the line was, he was on the cross, the last things he was saying. And he was saying, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. I go, that is it. That's the whole thing. That's the Bill story. Bill is doing these things. He knows not what he's doing because it's unconscious, and I have to forgive him. And when people start to recognize, well, there's two aspects to an individual, the programmed person and the spiritual person. The spiritual person is the one that created the honeymoon because wishes of love and desire and happiness, that's what the spiritual person wants. The programmed person is just playing the program, whatever they got downloaded. And if it's a negative program, can I blame them? And the answer is, well, not necessarily. They didn't even see it themselves, so they're disconnected from their own program. They don't even see it. If people could understand what we just said, then when a honeymoon is going, and an interruption occurs where a program shows up, and both people in the relationship are aware that There's their spiritual life and there's their program life, and that the program is invisible. Then in a relationship, if both people knew that, and I come up with a bad program, but Margaret sees this program, I didn't see it, Bill, okay? And the significance is, in a conventional situation, there's an argument. But in an aware situation, it's like, oh, did you really mean to say this? Did you really mean to be this way? Because this is what you didn't see, what you said. And now I have to think, no, I don't want to be that way. Now that's an instructional information and not an argument, because it gives me an opportunity to say, well, if I don't want to be this way, can I change it? And the answer is, of course I can change it. I'm the programmer. Except if you didn't see the program, then how can you change the program if it's invisible?
Yeah. I have a quick question about escapism, because it seems to me we're all falling prey to escape at a mass level to the point of global emotional emergency. Where does escape come into the subconscious cognitive autopilot mode?
The escape is the disconnect. I'm not playing the program. I don't really care. A good movie. Great movie is 2 hours of what? I'm not here. I'm not thinking about my life, where I am, what's going on in my world. I let go, because if I'm in the movie, watching the movie, these other thoughts can't be in the mind at the same time. So whether it's a drug, a movie, or whatever, there's so many different ways of what? Stop the damn program. Get me out. Escape from the program.
In that way, I'm a big advocate in taking responsibility, think of the word, for our own navigation system and our vibrational output.
But you can't take it if you have no consciousness or knowledge of what we've talked about. And this is the knowledge that is missing from the environment. Who are you? Well, there's a spiritual aspect to me, and there's a mechanical programmable aspect to me. Which one is which? Well, by numbers, unfortunately, 95% is the program. When I do get a chance to exercise my 5%, that's when the joyous part of my life is coming in, because I'm bringing in what I want. But 95% of the time, I am creating whatever I was programmed to create.
I'm really keen on looking for solutions. How do I break down my subconscious programming?
First, you have to identify it, okay? And it's interesting because I say, well, you got programmed from the last trimester of pregnancy through age 7. That is the biological period of programming, because this is the predominant activity of the brain up through age 7 is a vibration called theta. Theta is imagination. So this is how children under 7 operating in theta can mix the real world and the imaginary world. So a child has a tea party, they pour nothing in the cup, they drink to nothing, and they go, how wonderful this nothing was, That is theta. But what people don't recognize is theta is also hypnosis. I say, well, why is that? I say, listen, you got a computer, you got an operating system, but you got no programs. Where the heck are you going to get the programs from? You have to download them. From where? From the world around you. Your parents, your family, your community. You observe them. And in a state of theta, you're not just observing them, you're recording their behavior, okay? And this is really a very important reason for this, and that is, how many rules do you have to know to be a functional member of a family and a functional member of a community? Thousands of rules. I'll give an example. The way a father talks to his own child is not the way the father talks to the neighbor's child. It's not the way the father talks to the mother. It's not the way the father talks to the neighbor. It's not the way the father talks to the policeman. My God, all of a sudden you have to realize there are different programs for different things. And if I said to an infant, okay, you're 2 years old, here's the big book of rules. You study these rules and then you'll be a member of the family and a member of the community. Is like, well, obviously, no. Nature facilitates. Nature says, good. What we'll do is we'll make the first download period, download programs. What you observe will become downloaded program, okay? So generally, the child really follows more the sex type of themselves. The boy will watch the father's behavior and be more, that father's is more relevant as a download than other people's behavior. And the girl will look at the mother and basically pull it out, but that's a stereotype that is changing, okay? So You look at the parents in the family. And I say, yeah, because I can download thousands and thousands of rules instantly just by observing them. Boom, downloaded. So we program the computer. And then we're given access to the keyboard, which is creation. But the idea is now here's the problem. I got a program. I got a Microsoft Word. Yeah, but there's nothing on the page. I get the blank page. I create using the keyboard. Okay? So the subconscious mind is tantamount to the hard drive. It's got the programs. The conscious mind is tantamount to the keyboard. I have opportunity to type whatever I want. And that's the creative aspect that we are endowed with. Except if you didn't know it, you're blind to it, which nobody is telling you except the Jesuits, but nobody understood when they were telling them that you are operating from a program. And this program is a program of limitation. When it comes to health especially, what does the average kid learn in a typical family? Oh, I'm sick, mommy's sick, dad's sick. Well, what's the result of being sick? Go to the doctor. And I go, so what's the relevance? It said, the first thing is this: you're not in charge of your health. There's a professional in charge of your health. You learn this. I go, why is it relevant? Because in whatever the doctor's prognosis is your creation. They cause people, without knowing their role as the provider of truth. I'm a kid. I don't know anything about biology, health, or anything. But the doctor does, and I am programmed to what? Go to that person, take those person's words, become my life. And so a person can get diagnosis of cancer, die in 3 months according to the prognosis. And when people have looked at the autopsies, found out they didn't die of cancer. They died because the 3-month time limit that the truth provider gave them ran out, and they died. And there's so many cases. People didn't die from the cancer. They died from the belief of the cancer and the prognosis. They gave people in chemotherapy, they split a group up and gave one group saline solution, the other the chemotherapy. The 1/3 of the entire population that had saline had all of the side effects of chemotherapy. Their hair came out, digestive problems, health issues, all of that, and they just had saline. Belief created their life. The belief that the saline was chemotherapy means I will get what chemotherapy does, which is, I learned. Hair falls out, you get sick, prognosis, and they live the prognosis. So this is the big issue is, who are you buying your truth from? Because if you buy it from certain people, you will lose your power. And I want to add a joke part about the doctor being the professional, and that's where you go get help. Because you're capable of healing yourself. This is biology. People were healing themselves for 1 million years before medical school, okay? But in today's world, you can heal yourself, but guess what? There's a program. Program is, before you heal yourself, because you're sick, you go to the doctor. And then here's the jokey part. No one said the doctor had to do anything. You have to go to the doctor. So what's the consequence? How many people get well on the way to the doctor, or sitting in the doctor's waiting room going, geez, I don't feel so bad as I did before when I came in here. And it's like, yeah, because you accomplished step 1 of healing. You didn't need that step, but you were programmed with a step. Before I heal myself, go to the doctor. No one ever said the doctor had to do anything, you just had to go. So you complete step 1, you go to the doctor, guess what? Now the automatic healing will start to take place, because it would have done that, except you held it back with the belief that first I go to the doctor. A program of limitation.
I see. You have identified the creational properties of consciousness and the conscious mind. I'm wondering how consciousness comes into the sentient human condition.
How consciousness comes into the sentient condition? Or does the sentient condition come in with the consciousness at the same time? Let's separate what sentient is from consciousness.
That's what I'm wondering.
Oh, okay. In my perspective, okay, sentience is about feelings. And I say, well, this is really good. It's not information about what's going on or what to do or step by step anything. Sentient just says, is this a good thing or a bad thing? where's this on the gradient of love, which is go to that end as far as you can, or fear, which go to that end. You can have I like something, so it's off the midline, but it's not all the way to love. So sentient feelings are gradations in a range of positive and negative. Life, death, actually, is what it's all about. And so it itself isn't saying what's going on, how to do what's going on, how to respond. No, it just says, are you in the place that you need to be for your life at this moment? And then that's where the programs come in, and then you rate a program based on this sentient experience. Did I have so much joy and health and happiness when I did this? Well, then great. This program is one I like. If this one over here, I do it, it's like, it scares the hell out of me and I feel closed down and everything. It's like, well, then that one I don't want to do. So you're giving a gauge to where I'm going to move in response to a program. So I call it the compass. Should I move this way or should I go this way? It's like, what's the feeling? Okay. But as itself, does it generate consciousness? No, I think it's a byproduct of consciousness. It gives more information to consciousness, it's a different version of information.
That makes sense. Thank you for that clarification. I'm wondering about the fractal geometries, and can you apply that to emotions, feelings, sentience, consciousness? How does that fit into the equation?
Well, for me, fractal geometry was the key to everything in this regard. Life, nature is a fractal in its design. Geometry, putting structure into space is what geometry is all about. Fractal geometry is based on a different geometry than we learned in school, which was called Euclidean geometry. Euclidean geometry is all the squares, cubes, spheres, cones, three-dimensional objects, and stuff like that. But you can't really use those objects and create nature. Make a cloud with Euclidean geometry. It's like, that's not possible. So what's the issue? The issue is there's a different geometry. Nature uses the fractal. It means fractional. And I say, what's relevant about it? It's a unique geometry that is so simple in its mathematics because it's a simple equation that is called iterated, repeated again. I go, well, what does that mean? I go, here's one. Take a line. Here's the equation. Take a line and cut it in half. Okay? And I say, fine. I take, let's say, a 1 foot line. I cut it in half. Now I got a 6-inch line. I say, feed it back into the equation. Take a line, cut it in half. Well, this time it's a 6-inch line. So now the outcome is 3-inch line. I say, take that 3-inch line, put it back in the equation. Take a line, cut it in half. Now it's 1.5 inches. So I use the same equation and take the answer and then feed it back in. Well, there's a reiteration or iteration, a repeat of the same thing. The relevance in the structure is that then the structure has repeats in the geometry again. And that the structure that's repeating itself is also functional. Not just a structure, but a functional repeat of structure and function, okay? So what's relevant to me is this. It's like, I study cells. Why? Because I'm going to learn about humans. Go, how are you going to learn about humans from a cell? First fact is this. There's not one new function in this entire human body that's not already present in a single cell. Single cell is a fractal image of a human. Its mechanism, its behaviors are what a human is built out of. We're an enlarged cell. We're made out of 50 trillion cells, but they merge together into one community. So a human is a community, not an individual. And I say, well, why is it relevant? Because if you want to get information about the universe and you can see a pattern at one level, you can generally apply that pattern to the next level. So I can study a cell, see the pattern of how it works, and then make a direct connection to the biology of a human because we're using the same mechanisms. And then humanity is the coherent, not yet experienced, coherent population of all humans coming together as one community. And that's an evolutionary step that if we get there, we move on to the next level.
That's what my next question, actually, because I really want to take it from the individual to the collective.
Yes.
That's part of the journey. That's been part of my journey. is really becoming aware of my oneness.
Yeah.
And so, paraphrasing the great psychologist Carl Jung, in the process of maturation, the individual inevitably realizes that they are indivisible from everyone and everything, right? And as more of us realize this, we have the chance of actually creating a conscious civilization in this planet. So my question to you is, Bruce, how do you actually see this happening?
Oh, it's really wonderful. Using fractals again, in our current belief of evolution, a Darwinian theory of evolution, the metric are genes. Oh yes, as you get primitive organism with a few genes, and as you get more and more and more complexity, and you go up the tree of life, and humans are up here. Then the interesting thing is about, well, there's supposed to be a lot of genes up there because the simple organisms has a few genes in our consciousness, but the complexity and traits of an organism are increased with more genes. And so when the Human Genome Project got off the ground, scientists had already calculated that there was going to be over 100,000 genes, nearly 150. Well, when they actually carried out the Human Genome Project, they found that as they started the project, they worked on a simple organism, a worm called Caenorhabditis elegans. It's a name this big, but the worm is about 0.5 millimeter, 1,271 cells. It's a very primitive organism with a small brain of over 300 cells. The idea was that if you study this organism, which they had behavior and genes, that they can connect the genes to the behavior, which was the intention. 20,000 genes, and they said, okay, good, that's a small organism. Let's go up and see ultimately what the human has. It's supposed to be 150. 20,000 genes. We got the same number of genes as a worm with 1,271 cells. Point, genes are not a metric of evolution that you can't measure. That doesn't tell you anything. Consciousness is evolution. The first and more accurate theory of evolution was not Charles Darwin. It was Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck. 50 years before Darwin, Lamarck published the actual first scientific article on evolution. So by rights, the founder of evolution is Lamarck. The difference between Lamarck and Darwin is profound. Darwin's idea was heredity is controlling evolution, and that alterations of genes, which are called random mutations, lead to alterations in the character of the offspring, and that these alterations can then adapt and adjust to changes. So, most important point is why are we here, according to Darwinian theory? Well, it's a two-step process. Step one, random mutation. Step two, nature will select those strongest. Natural selection. Random mutation, natural selection. Well, the first step was random mutation. So I said, then why are we here? It's called random mutation. It's an accident. Give me a reason why we're here. Well, a whole bunch of accidents. I go, well, there's no purpose in that. It was a whole bunch of accidents. But that's our prevailing evolutionary theory. Lamarck, 50 years before, said there's a lockstep interaction between organisms and environment. That polar bears are not in the tropics, they're in the Arctic, and orchids are not in the Arctic, they're in the tropics. It's like, well, then organisms fit the environment. So in his theory, he said that there's an interaction between the environment and the organism that leads the organism to adjust and adapt to changes in environments. Well, then what would be causing that? And the answer has to be awareness of the environment. It's really the cause. And so when I started to understand the nature and biology of what was controlling the cell, it was important for me to search for this for a very simple reason. 53 years ago, I did experiments on stem cells, which are embryonic cells, and cloning them. And the result was I put one stem cell in the culture dish, divides every 10 hours about, so it keeps doubling and doubling. After a week, I have 30,000 cells in the culture dish. They're all genetically identical because they came from one parent. I put them into 3 different petri dishes and changed the composition of the environment, the culture medium, the chemistry. So I have genetically identical cells in 3 dishes, but 3 different environments, chemistry. And in one environment, the cells form muscle. In the second different environment, the cells form bone. The third environment, the cells form fat cells. And the question is, well, what controlled the fate of the cells? And the answer was, they all had the same genes. The only thing that was different was the environment. So this was a finding that was pioneer work in what is now called epigenetics, okay? Because it said the genes didn't control the fate. It was the environment interaction with the cell that controlled the fate. Well, this is also Lamarckian. This is what Lamarck said. So now my problem was, after I showed that, my colleagues said, well, that's nice what you just showed, but show me how it works, because everybody was working on genes. And I was saying, it wasn't the genes that made this decision. And they just ignored me because it was like, well, how does that work? So I spent my time then trying to identify, how does an environmental signal control genetics? And that led me to a structure called the cell membrane, the skin of the cell. And the skin of the cell would pick up an environmental signal with a receptor and send a signal, a coherent signal, into the cell to control the function with what's called an effector, or in this case, a channel. And I go, so what was the relevance? I said, the cell reads an environmental signal and adjusts its biology and now its genetics, with epigenetics, to complement the environment. So it was no accident that any organism formed. Every organism formed in cooperation and coherence with an environment, except for us, who have destroyed the environment without recognizing we are the environment, and we cannot survive without the environment. This wake-up call is coming at this moment. But then why it became so important, so after all that long discourse, I'm sorry for the time, but here's what the conclusion was. How did an environmental signal affect a function in the cell? And the answer is these two proteins, the receptor and the channel in this case, are built into the membrane. And they translate signal, stimulus, into response. Stimulus response, that's what it is. And I said, well, that's a unit of perception. That's what its function is. I'm perceiving this. How? Stimulus came in, I made a response. Stimulus in. So I go, oh, well, then what's consciousness? Perceptions. Lots of them, integrated, coherent, and all that. I go, well, then what's consciousness in the biology? I go, the fundamental unit is the receptor channel complex, a protein, a pair of proteins. I go, oh, so if you add more perception units, you get more consciousness. I go, absolutely. Then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, they fit into the membrane, these proteins. So the membrane has a thickness, but the proteins are virtually the same thickness of the membrane. I say, why is that important? Because I can't stack proteins on top of each other because they can't fit in the membrane. The only way you could put proteins in the membrane is laterally. They can sit side by side. I go, oh my God. Then there's a mathematics for consciousness. How many perception units can go in the membrane? I go, it's based on surface area, membrane surface area. Okay? The more surface, the more units, the more perceptions. So evolution now has a metric measuring surface area. I go, okay, then what did I find? And this is going to lead really into a conclusion. What did I find is this. The most primitive organisms are called bacteria. They have a capsule around them, an extracellular capsule, a matrix that holds a cell together. I say, why is it relevant? Because the size of the cell must fit inside the capsule. I say, yeah, but then there's membrane around the cell. I go, yeah, but guess what? The size of the cell is limited. There's a capsule. I can't make any more membrane in a certain amount. So I say, so what was evolution? More surface area. I go, great. Till what? Until you maximize the surface area of the bacteria. Why? Because you couldn't put any more membrane in it. Then I say, evolution stopped. I couldn't add any more membrane. And then I say, oh, edit. Oh, crap. I mean, it was so exciting at that moment because I can't make a smarter bacterium. There's no room. Phase 2. Bacteria come together in a community and share their awareness under a membrane called a biofilm. So there's a heterogeneous population, not all the same bacteria, all different kinds, sharing their particular character or function with each other, integrating them all. And what did they create? the precursor of what's called an amoeba. And I say, why was that important? The amoeba is not like an invertebrate with a shell on the outside. The amoeba has a skeleton on the inside, which meant what? I could expand the membrane 1,000 times more than I could with a bacterium. Thousands of times more membrane, more intelligence. Oh, so the bacteria became the element, made the smartest bacterium, joined a community to share the awareness of all the smart bacteria. But then what did they do? They evolved at the higher level into what is called an amoeba, where some bacteria are left, like the mitochondria. They're still there. But the functions of all the bacteria, their functions, DNA, are collected into a structure called the nucleus. I don't have to have all the individuals. I have all the instructions to make all the functions. So I made amoeba with what? More membrane. I expanded the awareness, much more intelligent, right? But guess what? Even to reach a finite size for an amoeba, why? It's like a water balloon. A balloon you put water in. The skin of the balloon is the membrane. I said, if you put a small amount of water in a balloon, we could throw that around all day long. But if you start to put too much water in and the membrane gets bigger and bigger, it's like, yeah, now it's smarter and smarter. And guess what? There's a point where the fragility of the membrane can't hold the cytoplasm. You make a cell too big and it rips. The water balloon. Too much water, try and throw it. It'll just burst. Oh my God. The amoeba reached the most intelligence an amoeba could have by maximizing its membrane. Evolution stopped. Then what? Communities of amoebas. And we have 50 trillion amoebas. We are a community of 50 trillion cells sharing their awareness and collectively making a community with the intelligence of what? This brain. And here's an interesting fact again. The brain is like the capsule on a bacterium. You can only put so much membrane in there. So a primitive brain, like a primitive mammal, let's say a rat, the brain is like a small bubble, okay? But when you get to the human, inside that skull is what? Sulci and gyri. What is that? Surface area. It was packing more surface area until it what? It filled up the skull. You can't put any more brain in there. Then what? Made the smartest human. Then what? Fractal image. Every time you make the smartest individual, the next level of evolution is the community of individuals. So
community is at the core. And I love that you wrote about it's not the survival of the fittest, it's the survival of the most loving.
The most loving, the most adaptive to the environment. And it's interesting because in Spontaneous Evolution, which I wrote with Steve Behrman, a very funny, interesting phrase is that a garden is not a battleground. And yet our evolutionary theory says that life is a battle. Life is a struggle for survival and competition. And it turns out, if you understand nature, it's not a battleground. It's the height of cooperation. I say, so we programmed a population to compete in a world where evolution was based on cooperation. Problem, today's world.
Yes. And we're the only species that turns against itself. Individually, in my case, that happened with addiction, and collectively.
Program. Because we were programs. We lost the programming. If you go look at less than human, tigers, and you see how they live with their young, how they teach them everything, how they love them, they groom them, they hold them, they do all these things. This is part of creating a harmony in an individual. And in our world, we have removed that kind of connection. And when people are not in harmony, they're more isolated as individuals. And yet evolution is based on the complete opposite. It's not the isolation of individuals, it's the community of individuals. And so we pushed the system into the competition. And in the competition, without awareness of what we were doing, destroying not just the environment, but destroying ourselves. Human civilization has experienced what I call autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease is self-destruction. And so the biggest diseases on this planet are self-destruction, cardiovascular disease. You're destroying yourself, all these things like that. It's these issues, cancer, self-destruction. There's no cancer gene. It's an activation of consciousness, and that people can have a spontaneous remission when they change consciousness. And all of a sudden, it's like we have been so led to believe we're mechanical devices controlled by genes that we have given up the power and blamed it on our genes. So I got bad genes. It's like, no, not true. But you might have some bad ideas, and epigenetics controls those genes, and epigenetics is the interface of perception to cellular genetics, perception to genetics.
I see. One of the fathers of quantum theory, Max Planck, said, "We can't get behind consciousness." And another, Erwin Schrödinger, said, there's only one mind, right? So my question to you is, what is your theory of how all life everywhere may be united as one mind, as one single consciousness?
Very simple. There's no mechanical physical world. It's all energy. This is the nature of quantum physics. I say, what's the relevance? You can't separate energy. There's no borders. People say, okay, I got this hand and this hand. They're separate. Look, see, the two hands. Oh, now they're separate hands. And the idea is your physical expression of hands are separate, but the hand is an energy field. And I say, why is it important? I don't care how far I move these apart. There's still energy fields connected to each other. Energy has no borders. And that means everything that's made out of energy is together integrated into a whole energy matrix, okay? So people have to recognize, first of all, the illusion of physical reality. It's an illusion of quantum physics, okay? And the relevance is once you recognize that you're energy, then you recognize that energy is shaping everything. And that's a quote from Albert Einstein. I love it. I use it all the time. The quote is, "The field," which is the energy, "the field is the sole governing agency of the particle." Particles are perception of reality. That the energy field is the governing agency of this reality. And I say, so what's relevant? I go, consciousness is an expression of an energy field. That consciousness is manifesting your reality. Then I go back and say, yeah, but unfortunately you've been programmed. So are you manifesting your reality, or are you manifesting a program?
I'm interested in this idea of a commonly sensed sentience. And I'm wondering if the future of humanity hinges upon our abilities to develop that muscle, pump that muscle of our subtle senses.
First thing we have to recognize is that being sentient is having feelings, and that the feelings are compasses. And if our compasses are misprogrammed, then we're going off in wrong directions without us even knowing it, following the compass. So the first thing we have to do is step back and recognize, what's the motivation behind my movement? Am I moving from fear, or am I moving from love? That's a big difference in how the two outcomes are going to be profoundly different. We have to awaken people. Knowledge is power. Fine. Everyone goes like that. In my lectures, I want to emphasize it differently. I say same thing, but it's more relevant. Okay? And that is, a lack of knowledge is a lack of power. What you have not been programmed with, you have lost your power. And the idea from ancient history always talked about the nature of spirituality as a power that controls who we are. But we let that go when we separated matter and energy. But now quantum physics said that was an illusion, bring it back together again. And then we start to recognize that consciousness is the sole power, the field that is shaping the particle, in this case, the body. The mind shapes the body. Mind is field, body is particle. And that knowledge allows us to shape it in a healthy way. And a misperception disguised as knowledge will take us off the track and put us in a different place. And we built a civilization on what I emphasize 4 basic misperceptions that have created this problem that we're experiencing right now. And it's all due to programs of belief that are not correct. Belief number 1 is that we live in a Newtonian universe, which is separate energy and matter from each other, separate realms. It's like, no, it's all one. And this is why energy has to come back into our story, because we've left it out, okay? Myth number 2 is the belief that genes control life, which then makes people victims, because as far as they know, they didn't pick them, they can't change them, and we're telling them that genes turn on and off by themselves, I'm a victim of my heredity. So the idea of genetics is victimization. The new science, epigenetics, goes the other way. It says, no, consciousness is controlling your genes. You can change it by changing. Empowerment, okay? So the first two is Newtonian going to quantum. The second one is genetics going to epigenetics. And the third and fourth are both based on Darwinian theory, which shapes our culture. The first understanding of Darwinian theory is that accidents provided for our existence, which meant no purpose. And if you see that there's no purpose for humans, it's like, well, what the hell? Do what you want. But the reality is, no, it's not based on random mutations, it's based on adaptation, that we are continuously adjusting to match the environment. If we don't match the environment, we destroy it. We have to be in harmony with it, okay? So going from survival of the fittest to going to what I refer to as survival of the fittingest. Those that can fit in the best are going to be supported by nature. Nature is eliminating us now. Why? We've thrown a monkey wrench in the machine. We're destroying the web of life. This is why the current, what is called mass extinction event, is actually the result of human behavior. If we don't want to undergo mass extinction, then it's not the planet that has to change, it's us. We're the ones. So we go from survival of the fittest to learning how to live in harmony. And then the idea was living in harmony is not based on a struggle for survival, which is part of the Darwinian theory. A struggle for survival with competition for fitness. It's like, no, it's not a struggle for survival. It's a harmony that can create a garden by stopping the struggle and stopping this competition. The fittest. The competition is we're sucking the life out of the planet because people are competing with each other for what? Well, now material goods. You know, how do you get, where's your level in this planet? How much money do you have? Because money is energy. And then all of a sudden people are, pulling the energy, but aware from pulling it from the population. You get 1% with the energy and 99% of the victims. But they're programmed to buy into the story. So everybody's going, oh, that's life. And I go, no, it's another false assumption. So these four misperceptions create a culture that is not sustainable. And we've hit the wall. And it's a wake-up call. You got a choice. We don't have to do it. We've been here before. That if we want to live in harmony and learn to live in harmony, there's an evolutionary opportunity. But if you want to just play the game out to the end, well, then it's enjoy it because it's over with.
I love what you said about we hit the wall and we just can't do that anymore because that might fit in.
Yeah. Okay. Knowledge is power. A lack of knowledge is a lack of power. A misperception, by definition, is a lack of power. If you program a culture with misperceptions, you have disempowered them. And there are four fundamental misperceptions that have changed the culture to conform to the misperceptions. And then living in those misperceptions has created the extinction event that humans are facing right now. And the four misperceptions that we've been programmed with that are wrong are, number one, the belief in a Newtonian universe, which is matter and energy are separated from each other. Because quantum physics, the new insight is everything is energy, everything is entangled. The second misperception is that we are the victims of our genes, that we are programmed by our heredity. And it turns out, no, we're not. The new science of epigenetics reveals how consciousness writes the genetic activity. The third and fourth misperceptions related to Darwinian theory are, number one, why are we here when the belief of the system is it was all accidents of mutations, which meant no purpose, which is totally wrong. We were brought here to be part of a garden to support the garden element. And of course, that misperception, we've destroyed the garden, okay? And then how you do it is not based on survival of the fittest, which is another root of Darwinian theory, which means how do I know I'm the fittest? Because I'm competing and I beat you. And it's like, well, so we didn't evolve by people beating each other. We evolved because the new insight is it was cooperation, not competition, that creates evolution. And so with the misperceptions programmed, then shaping a culture to conform to those programs, This is leading to the extinction that we're facing right now. We're creating our own extinction.
Do you think that we've reached some kind of self-induced crisis point in order to collectively wake us up?
Well, it's certainly the situation that we're in today is certainly one that requires us to wake up if we want to continue. If you don't want to continue, then just keep playing the game, and then the last ones are the last ones. And there have been civilizations that have been here before at a very high level and have been lost. And civilizations before anything conventional history even wants to talk about. I mean, in our conventional perception is, oh, civilization started in about 5000 BC, Babylonia, the Phoenicians, and all that kind of stuff. We now know there was a city in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, which was a massive city 5,000 years before that. And nobody knows about that civilization. It's like, well, what happened to them? Guess what? They were at the same time as climate change. And the relevance was either you adapt to the climate change or you die from the climate change. People are talking about climate change. Oh, the water level is rising. It's going to affect coastal communities. Like, oh, yeah, that's going to do that. But that's not the problem. The problem is, how about food? How are you going to grow food if you don't know what the climate is? And all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, a scarcity of food on this planet. Why? Because if you're waiting for this climate to come back so you could grow your food, you're lost already because it's not coming back. It's a change. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey was this massive civilization that disappeared. And if you go actually and look at it, there might be a reason why is, how can you support a massive civilization in what is today more of an arid desert kind of environment? Where were they going to get their food from? They can't stay there. Boom. They dispersed and left. And where are we? Well, we're going to be in the very same exact situation if we don't understand that the changes that are happening are not going to reverse back to the way it was. It's change. What you have to do is learn how to accommodate change. And the most important thing at this moment is food, because the price of food is going up and people's incomes are very low. We're starving people.
Do you think one of the solutions is to roll out or popularize a shared, commonly sensed, like super sentience, like a greater level of awareness on a mass level?
This is actually where we have to go. You have to go there. Are we going to go there? And I say, well, it depends on the interests of those people that manipulate the situation. Corporations today. Are corporations looking for our future? I go, absolutely not. They don't even care about the future. They just want, how much money can I make today? How much can I extract from the planet? Now, oh, guess what? We're extracting all of it. And it's interesting because nobody really pays attention to the fact that global warming was being promoted by industry. Why? Because if the ice melts in the polar regions, there's fresh land to rape that you haven't been able to touch up to now. So they're looking and saying, oh, all those resources under the Arctic and Antarctic, boy, if that melts, we can get to them. And the idea is, so you mean you would destroy the planet to get the resources? The answer, not only would they, they've been doing that. Because the thinking is completely Darwinian, competitive. I don't care about the other person. I care about me. And you use something like a Darwinian theory, and you have hundreds of thousands of Africans dying from starvation, but you justify it by going, hey, survival of the fittest. Obviously, they're not the fittest, so they have to die. And it's like, that's not humanity. That's Darwinian stuff. That theory. Even Darwin, in the end, didn't support this theory. Darwin became more Lamarckian. But his followers said, that's a ravings of an old man. Same thing with Newton. Newton was an alchemist and a spiritualist, but his followers weren't. And when he would bring up that stuff, he was like, oh, that's the old man. He's out there somewhere. So both the followers of Newton and the followers of Darwin were following things that those two guys never actually end up supporting. And yet we so-called Darwinian theory, Darwin would go, this is not what I was thinking in the end, because he learned. Okay?
part of the purpose of this documentary is to inspire people to activate, become more aware, and take more responsibility for not only their vibrational output, but also being a part of the collective.
Yes.
One of the things I like to think of is I'm still suffering until the last person or sentient being, or perhaps, that includes vegetation, who knows how far that goes, is I'm still suffering if they're still suffering.
Because the world around us, not just us, the world around us, the other people, the environment, is a nurturing mechanism. You can't live alone. There's no individual that lives alone. We live in a community, whether you want to own it or not. But when you own it, then you can do something about it. But if I'm just another piece in a whole bunch of pieces, and I don't, I'm separate from all these pieces, you can't, that's not the evolution. The evolution is when all these little pieces come together and say, we are one multicellular community called humanity. And we're not there. It's visible as the carrot. It's hanging right there in front of us, okay? Can I get there? This is a trial period. Why? Because we've been here before and it didn't work. So this is the opportunity, but with our technology today, we have at our behest opportunities to control an environment. We can grow food indoors. Yeah, well, you're going to have to because you can't trust outdoor weather anymore. But if you say, I'll wait for the outdoor weather to get better, and I go, well, then you're lost. Because we have to say, the change that's happening is not going to revert back to the old days. And we are the ones that either going to learn to adapt, that was our evolution, or die out. You either adapt or you become extinct. That's your two choices right there. Are we facing extinction? Absolutely. In 1,000 years? No. 100 years? Maybe even that long, but maybe not. Maybe in the next 50 years, next 20 years. NASA, in their research, said industrial civilization is facing an irreversible collapse within the next few decades. And that was a decade or two ago. We're in that moment. So this is why I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and to present this, is because it's time for a wake-up call. Who are we? Are we these things? And originally, as a biologist, that's what I thought we were. Oh, genetic automatons. That's what we are. A bunch of chemicals came together, had an experience, died, went back into chemicals again and all that. And then when I started to understand the nature of what the cells showed me, is that our identity is not even in here. Our identity is received by perception units, that no two people even have the same identity perception units. This is why you can't exchange cells and organs between people, because if I put my cells into your body, your immune system will go, not self. I go, well, what's the first thing you recognize right there? Your cells have an identity. They're my cells, not your cells. And your immune system will know. And I said, so where's the identity? And that's when it's like, oh my God, on the surface of our cells, there are a set of antennas, protein receptors, receivers. And in fact, a bunch of them by medicine are called, I love it, self-receptors. Self-receptors, well, that's cool. But in the conventional Newtonian world, they said that the receptor, the physical receptor, was the identity of self. They failed to understand. The receptor responds to a signal. The signal is picked up by the receptor. So the set of receptors on no two people have the same set, okay? There can be some overlap, and that's how they decide who's going to get a heart or a lung or whatever. First, you look at the receptors of self on the donor, and then you look at all the people that need this organ. You find one whose self-receptors have somewhat of an overlap. Because if there's an overlap, there's less rejection by the immune system. So you don't just throw a heart into somebody, you find somebody who's close. But then here's the point. If you take the self-receptors off the surface, the cell is generic. It's not anybody's cell. It's a liver cell if it's a liver cell, or a brain cell. It's not Bruce's or anybody else's. And I go, wow, so identity are these antennas. I go, yeah, and I say, yeah, but then take one more step. Where does the signal come from that is picked up by these antennas? Well, the interesting fact is, where are the antennas located? On the outside surface. So if they're receiving a signal, it's not likely from the inside. It's from the outside. And when I saw that, I said, oh my God, I am a broadcast picked up by these receptors, and that I am playing this, and that this is an extension of who I am. And it's fun because the first moment that I owned my identity as a broadcast, I can't die. Why? The analogy is a television set playing a broadcast. This is the Bruce Show. Okay? Oh, guess what? If the television goes, we say television's dead. And I go, yeah, but did the broadcast stop? And they say, no. How do you know? I said, well, get another TV and tune it to the right station, and boom, the broadcast is back on again. I go, oh my God, I can't die. This is the television set. I am the broadcast. What's irrelevant? I'm immortal, but my televisions come and go. And that if I die, I'm still in an energy field. If an embryo shows up in the future with the same set of receptors, I'm back. Now the question is, does it have to be male or female? Nope, that's the television set. White, brown, black, red, yellow, nope, that's the television set. We have to disconnect. We are not the set. We are the broadcast. And so why be here? Which was the first question that came into my science mind, because I was not spiritual. Zero, okay? But the moment I understood the nature of the membrane thing, it was like instantly I said, oh my God, I'm not in here. So I went from not spiritual to spiritual in about a second. You know, it was just like, oh my God. And then it was interesting because my science brain goes, well, wait, if I'm a spiritual and I have a body, why not just be spiritual? I asked this question to myself. Why not just be spiritual? Why have the body? And of course, 50 trillion cells under my skin, who turned out to be comedian cells now, I find them to be, that I asked the question, why have both? And the answer welled up. I could feel the answer came right up from 50 trillion cells. And the response of my cells to my question, I asked, why have a spirit in a body? Why not just be a spirit? And the cells said, Bruce, if you're just a spirit, what does chocolate taste like? And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this is a spectrum analyzer. It takes energy and makes vision out of it. It takes energy and makes sound. It takes energy and makes taste and smell and touch and love. These are feelings, sentient feelings. Consciousness can have a thought. Love. How beautiful. What does love feel like? Oh, first you have to have a body. Then you know what love feels like. So we come into these bodies to do what? Experience. And then I say, yeah, but wait. I want to go to Mars. Can't get there. But I want to know what Mars is like. What is life like on Mars? Can't send a human. We send a thing that looks like a go-kart with all kinds of cameras and instruments on it. It's called the Mars Rover. I say, how does it work? The guy at NASA drives the vehicle around, and the sensory receptors on the vehicle send the signal back to the guy at NASA. So the guy at NASA can have, what's it like to be on Mars? Okay? We are Earth rovers. We came into these bodies to move around and stuff, but to have experiences that are sent back to source. And it's interesting because we have a belief that our consciousness is trapped in our head. They put wires on your head called electroencephalograph, and you can read your consciousness. And I go, there's a new device called magnetoencephalograph. It reads consciousness. I go, yeah, what's the unique? The probe is out here. I go, what's the relevance of that? Your consciousness is not in your head. Your consciousness is broadcast into the field. We are creating this field, and the field shapes the particle. And that we're creating all this. And so it's like, oh my God. And this is the part that just changed my whole life. Because coming into the programming, oh, we're born, and then we die, okay? And it's like, oh no, we're immortal, but then why? Because the old belief, if you had a good life and you die, you go to heaven. My new belief, I was born into heaven. I was born here. Why? What's creation? I'm creating using a mechanism to create. And so I'm putting information in, NASA, going to the vehicle, and the vehicle sending back the response, sentient experiences. And what is love, man? If you feel it's like, you know, that's a compass point that you always want to follow at that moment. And so my simple conclusion myself is, this is heaven. This is where I came to create. And once I'm out of the program, I manifest heaven on earth anyway. And that was the whole idea. So instead of wondering about what the heck the afterlife is all about, it's like, man, you missed it while you were here. I can imagine a cartoon where St. Peter's at the gate, and back in the starry heaven, you see the earth back there. And the person shows up at the gate, and St. Peter says, well, how was your experience in heaven? It's like, oh, you just, that's where you went for heaven. And the idea is, but we can create it. And that's what heaven is what? It's a personal creation. No two people have the same definition. They create what the heck they want. And so the idea is, yeah, I have an opportunity. I can create my heaven. How do I do that? Get out of the program. The program took away the power that I was creating and said I'm a victim. This is completely the evolution that has to happen at this moment. The evolution through knowledge, the evolution through the information that you're trying to provide in this video is evolutionary, because knowledge is power. We must return power. I trust the individual more than I trust the 1%.
Me too. If I'm a broadcast and the field is all around me and consciousness is indeed non-local, all of which science proves, then does this prove that telepathy is real, that psychic intuition is real, that channeling is sound, etc.?
So all of this is real if you let go of the limitation of a Newtonian world. The Newtonian world says, oh, that's energy stuff, and we don't deal with energy. In a Newtonian world, the body is physical. We only deal with physical things. You want to fix it? Give it something physical. Give it a drug. I go, yeah, you know what? Before drugs were introduced into our consciousness, people healed by energy. They always did. Hands-on healing. It was always the way it was. It still is the way it is, in spite of the drugs, which are making things worse in most cases.
Absolutely. Let's create heaven on earth.
That is something that's so exciting, only because I have to admit, from a guy who was totally unaware of spirituality, totally unaware of everything we've just been talking about. I was just studying the cells. But when they showed me how it worked, it was like, oh my God, I have a complete misunderstanding of this. I had to change. It very interesting is that when I first came upon this awareness of, oh my God, consciousness is creating our life experiences and everything, I was so excited, and I wanted to tell anybody. I get a bunch of people, put them in a room, and I get there and I say, if you understand what I'm talking about, you can create the most fabulous life. And in those early days, they looked at me and they go, Lipton, your life doesn't look that great for a guy who says you know this stuff. And the relevance was, that was my wake-up call. Knowledge I had in my conscious mind, behavior subconscious. I have a very well-educated conscious awareness, but it doesn't translate into subconscious just because you learned it. So I was giving them a learning, a knowledge, but myself, yeah, off the top of my head, that's where the knowledge was, conscious. Was I living it? No. And that was a wake-up call that said, well, that's great. If you want to talk about this, at least you should try it. And I did try it. And what was the result? My life is heaven on earth. I love my life. I look forward to every day. I have no idea what's going to happen. Doesn't mean I know anything that's going to happen. But I sure have a new insight into what is balance, what things I would put my energy into, what things I will hold as important, what things I'll reject as not important. Because if you get rid of all the non-important things, then guess what? You're creating what you want.
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about. And I concur. I love my life too, because I've had my own way of coming to these conclusions and creating the life that I want. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come out here, sharing your wisdom and your inspiration. And let's all go co-create heaven on earth.
Kristin, I am so happy to be here because I know that collectively all of us that can help provide a guiding light can lead us out of a certain death of a mass extinction into a heaven on earth for everybody every day. And having touched that, it's like I will dedicate my life to, because if everyone around me is experiencing heaven on earth, my heaven is even better.
I agree. You've just given me the goosies. I feel the same way, and that's why I'm so incredibly committed to rolling out projects like this.
Yeah, and I thank you for coming the distance.
And your work as well. Beautiful.
It's fun.
It is fun.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.